All right, good morning, everyone. Officially welcome to Friday, which is a good day, right? Because it's the day before the weekend. Um, Today, what I have for you is we'll finish up our little thing on critical thinking. We'll talk a little bit about agricultural revolution. Then I have an article for you to read that will turn into a bit of an assignment, okay? And I'll help you along with that. Um, and we'll kind of see in terms of when it's due. I'll figure out how far we get today, and then I'll figure out when it'll be due. Okay, not a super difficult. Well, it's not a long assignment, but it might be a little tricky to pull the argument out of this paper. And again, that's why we're doing the critical thinking now and trying to figure out how that works so that we can do it when we read an article, because that's that's kind of the goal here, right? Is to be able to read something and say, I know what this person is arguing. They're arguing this because of this and this and this, right? And then you can kind of go from there and figure out whether you want to believe them or not. But that's kind of the goal here, right? So let's just see who's here. So Aria's here. Good morning, Aria. Mike is here. Good morning, Mike. Kayla is here. Good morning, Kayla. And Vito is here. Good morning, Vito. All right. Shoot. Sorry about that. I was muted for that part. Very quick recap. We're going to talk about critical thinking today and the agricultural revolution, and then I'll have an assignment for you to do toward the end of the lesson today. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for telling me. So arguments, of course, are conclusions that are supported by premises. And yesterday, I gave you an example of an argument, which was the whole coffee thing. We seem to understand that pretty well. And then you proceeded to come up with your own arguments that were pretty good as well. I enjoyed hearing those. And so I felt really good about our sort of grasp of how that works, okay? So I just have a few more things to say on arguments, and then we'll get into that agricultural revolution thing. Did we do this yesterday? We did do this? Okay. So we read through all of these very simple arguments, and you identified for me the conclusion of these arguments and the premises, right? And again, I think one of the best ways to sort of help identify the conclusion is to then ask yourself, why should I believe that? Right? Why should I believe that statement? And again, we kind of ran into almost a little bit of trouble on the first one because we thought that, oh, maybe the conclusion was that assault rifles have no peaceful civilian use. But if you ask yourself, well, why should I believe that? Well, because the government should ban them. It doesn't make sense, right? And so asking yourself, why should I believe that, will help you to identify the premises and help you confirm that what you think is the conclusion is actually the conclusion. Okay? So we went through all these without too much trouble, and that was good. I was happy to see that. You guys did a good job. This we did not see, right? Yesterday? We did not see that. Okay, so let's start with this. So have a look at this. The cost of the new XJ fighter jet is $650 million. The cost of 3 AR-21 bombers is $1.2 billion. The Canadian government intends to fund such projects. And my question, of course, is this an argument? Is there an argument here? I see shaking of heads. No? Why do you say no?
This is an action.
It's an action?
It's not an argument. Nothing to
Okay.
argue on.
Yeah. What do you think, Felicia?
It's the like Canadian government who funds the one such project. Like there's no objection between them.
Yeah. It's just kind of it's just information,
Yeah.
right? They're just kind of telling you about it, but you don't feel like they're trying to convince you, right? They're not saying, hey, this is what you should think or this is what you should believe. They're just telling you how it is, right? There's no argument here at all. But of course we could make it an argument, right? We could add in a few more pieces. So have a look at this. The Auditor General, if you want to know, the Auditor General is the department of the government that kind of looks at everyone's budgets and makes sure that they're spending their money properly. And if they're not spending their money properly, the Auditor General issues a report and says, hey, this department is not spending its money correctly. But anyway, so the Auditor General says that any weapon that costs more than $50 million will actually impair, it will hurt our military readiness. The cost of the fighter jet is $650 million. The cost of the bombers is 1.2. We should never impair our military readiness. Therefore, Canadian government should cancel both of these expensive projects. Do we have an argument now?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are we being asked to believe here?
It's too much. Like they should cancel it because it's too expensive.
Right. They should cancel these projects. They should not buy these things, right? Why not? Why should we believe that?
Because it says like the Auditor General says that any weapon that costs more than 50 million will impair the military readiness.
Right.
But it costs more than 50 million.
Right. So Auditor General says that weapons that cost more than 50 million will impair our military readiness. The jet,
It's 650 million.
Right.
And the cost of bombers is 1.2, so it will cost more than 50 million.
right. So both of those things cost more, right? And one more thing, they're going to impair our military readiness and second last sentence. We should not impair our military readiness. That's the kind of thing that you kind of assume, right? But it's still there, so we should state it, right? We kind of assume that that's true, but yeah, we should not impair our readiness, right? So yeah, now we have an argument, right? Now we have someone trying to convince us of something, okay? Have a look at, yeah, there you go. Have a look at this one here. So I usually explain this one and say that, like once upon a time in the Stone Age, you used to have to like go to the bank to figure out how much money you had in your account. You used to have a little bank book and you'd go there and the person behind the counter would actually tell you how much money you had. Bizarre. I don't know how we lived in such a world. How could you ever get anything done when you had no idea how much money you had unless you went to ask a person? Insane, right? But anyway, so Alicia here was obviously living in the age of dinosaurs. And so she went to the bank to get a more recent bank statement on her checking account. The teller told her that the balance was $125. Alicia was shocked that it was so low. She called her brother to see if he was playing a prank on her, but he wasn't. Finally, she concluded that she was a victim of bank fraud. Okay? So again, my question, is there an argument here? Victoria says no. What do others say? Argument? No argument? I see shaking of heads. Why is there no argument here? It's a little story, okay? And?
She got her own conclusion. Like, if this happened, and that means he becomes a victim.
Yeah.
So he already know this is the truth or this is fact. Nothing's wrong.
Yeah, she's kind of come to her own conclusion here, right? But none of this is really like trying to prove it to us, right? It's kind of her, she's doing her thing, but they're not trying to convince us of it, right? And so, again, let's say if we made the mistake, let's say we thought, okay, this is an argument. If you thought this was an argument, what would you say the conclusion is? if it was an argument, what sounds like the conclusion? Yeah, she's a victim of bank fraud, okay? All right, let's pretend it's an argument. Alicia is a victim of bank fraud. Ask yourself the question, why should we believe that? Well, she went to the bank to get a more recent bank statement. No, that's not proof, right? That's not a premise. That's not a reason why we should believe it. The teller told her that her balance was $125. Does that mean she was a victim of bank fraud? No. She was shocked to see that it was so low. Does that mean she's a victim of bank fraud? No, right? Many of us are shocked when we look at our bank balance. I frequently am. I wish I was a victim of bank fraud, but I never am. It's always that I just have no money. Her brother wasn't playing a prank on her. Does that mean she was a victim of bank fraud? No, right? So even if we screw up and we say, oh yeah, it's an argument, there's the conclusion, if we ask ourselves the question, it's like, oh, there's no evidence here, right? None of this is a strong premise that means she was a victim of bank fraud, right? I won't complicate it, right? So it's, like Victoria says, it's just a little story. Like Kenny says, Alicia's kind of coming to her own conclusion here, but we're not being asked to believe it, right? They're not trying to convince us of this in itself, right? So, not an argument, right? Not an argument. The last thing I'll say here is, the last thing I'll say is, don't confuse an explanation for an argument, okay? Explanations try to tell you why something is happening. Arguments have a case to make, right? They want you to believe something. So if I say, for instance, yes, Kwan stole the money, but he needed the money to buy food, okay? Or if I say, Kwan stole the money, 3 people saw him do it, right? Those are different, right? The first one is a bit of an explanation, right? I'm admitting that he stole the money, but I'm explaining why, right? He needed it for food. But in the second one, I'm making an argument, right? I'm saying, Kwan stole the money. Well, why should we believe that? Well, 3 people saw him do it, right? So my second sentence has something to prove to you. It wants to convince you. The first one is not really trying to convince you. It's more saying, yeah, okay, he stole it, right? I'm admitting to it, but I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Okay, so again, an explanation is not an argument either, right? So little stories, not an argument. Explanations are not an argument. You have to ask yourself, why should I believe this thing? And if you're not getting any reasons to believe it, you're not dealing with an argument, right? You're dealing with an opinion or an explanation or some rambling BS by somebody, which there's a lot of out there. You're not dealing with an argument, right? And one of the things I often see, and often from people who are kind of, how do I put this? They're into like kind of conspiracy theories and things like that. Often what they'll do is they don't make an argument, they just ask you a bunch of questions. What if this was true? What would you say if I told you blah, blah, blah? How would you feel if your government was blah, 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 blah? And they're just kind of asking you a bunch of questions, trying to sort of press your fear buttons, right? Or press your anger buttons. But there's nothing there, right? There's no argument, there's no evidence, there's no, case being made for something. They're just asking you a bunch of questions, and it's fluff, right? There's nothing there to sort of think critically about or believe. But again, they like to sort of ask you questions and press your buttons while not actually making a reasonable argument, right? Okay, does that sound okay? Does it make sense? All right. We'll see in a little bit. We'll see if we can actually put this skill into practice, which I think we can, but we'll come back to it momentarily. So, switching back to our kind of anthropology and our prehistory stuff, we talked about hunter-gatherers, we talked about foragers, right? There was lots of simple foragers, right? But in certain parts of the world, Some foragers, some hunter-gatherers develop a more complicated subsistence strategy, right? And most of the time it's because they live in areas that have a lot of food and can kind of support more people. And again, here on the northwest coast, this was such an area, right? And so we see a lot of cultures that fall under the complex hunter-gatherer category, right? They've got lots of stuff, they store their food, they have status differences, they focus on certain types of food at certain times of the year, all of these things, right? And so I also mentioned that, again, this is kind of our default setting as human beings, right? This is how we got our food for hundreds of thousands of years, right? 200,000 or 300,000 years humans spent getting their food this way, right? Similar to the way we saw the Hadza living their lives, right? But as we also mentioned, this is not really the way that people get their food anymore, right? The only foragers left are kind of pushed to the margins of the landscape, right? Because most of the land is tied up in farming, right? Whether it's crops or whether it's animals, most of the food producing land out there is devoted to farming, right? And so again, foragers have kind of been pushed off into land that's not really good to farm on. Now, the question of course is why, right? And part of the answer is that about 12,000 years ago, some humans in some places of the world start to do something radical, okay? They start to do something unprecedented, right? No animal does this, really. They start to actually grow and cultivate their own food, okay? And this is a big change. This is a massive change for humans. It doesn't sound like much, right? It doesn't sound like a big deal, but I guarantee you that everything about our modern world that we know today is made possible by this change, okay? If we never do this 12,000 years ago, if nobody ever starts to grow their own food, none of this happens, okay? So this is a massive, massive change in the course of human history, okay? And again, maybe it doesn't sound so exciting, but I guarantee you it's huge, okay? You cannot understate how important this is. So it happens first in a couple of places around the world, right? And so you can see, well, hopefully you can see there, it's kind of tiny. Geez, I can't see it with or without my glasses. You can see the earliest cultivation starts to happen in the Middle East, in what's called Mesopotamia. They'll be growing a variety of different crops there. And you'll see that a little bit later on, other places follow, right? We see Southeast Asia and parts of the Mediterranean. We see Central Africa people there start to grow their own food. There's a couple of places in North and South America that start to grow their own food as well. Almost everyone, I won't say that. So people start to switch, and again, they start to switch at different times. But we shouldn't think of this as, okay, well, Egypt and Mesopotamia start farming, and then they kind of tell these other people how to do it, and then these other people tell these other people how to do it. It's not like that, right? It's not a knowledge that kind of is passed along. It's people start doing it at different times for their own reasons, okay? And we should probably say that, growing your own food is probably something that hunter-gatherers understood very well, right? Remember, these people are experts in their environment. They know all the plants and all the animals. They know how plants grow, right? They're very observant. They're very intelligent. They understand how that happens, right? So the knowledge, so farming takes some knowledge and development, but it certainly wasn't a mystery to hunter-gatherers, right? They get it, right? They know how their environment works. Okay? Now, to answer the question of why, right? Why foragers suddenly abandon the subsistence strategy that has served them well for 300,000 years and why they start farming is difficult to figure out from history, from the archaeological record, right? Again, when people start farming, there's still not that many people on the planet, right? Maybe 8 million people. Not a lot. Right? There's not a lot left behind, right? Again, small groups of people, they don't have a lot of stuff. They don't produce a lot of garbage, right? And so it's difficult to sort of dig up the remains of these cultures and figure out what they were doing. When people start to switch to farming, there's no writing, okay? No, writing has not been invented yet. So we have no written records of what's happened. The other thing is that this process probably took generations to happen, right? So we're not dealing in a situation where foragers wake up one morning and they're like, you know what? Farming, right? Yesterday we gathered and we hunted. Today, farming, right? It's not like that, right? It's a very gradual transition from one to the other. And again, it probably takes hundreds of years for people in one area to switch from hunting and gathering to something that looks more like a farming subsistence, okay? So again, slow transition, right, from one into the other. But the big question is why, right? Why do we switch? Why do we make this switch if we were doing so well with hunting and gathering before? And so to answer this question, I would like to read this article, okay? And the article is written by Jared Diamond. The title is "The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race." It's a bold statement. It's a bold title, but he does like to grab you with his fancy titles. He's written a few books. Some of them have been very popular. I know Guns, Germs, and Steel was on the sort of New York Times bestseller list for quite a while. So he's a pretty popular author, historian, and he wrote this article kind of answering this question, right? Why do people switch to farming in the first place? So here's what we'll do, okay? So I have some questions for you, and I've put them into an assignment in Microsoft Teams so that you can kind of work on it in Microsoft Teams, then when you're done, you can hand it in to me, okay? So I basically have just 3 questions for you, although I kind of cheated because some of them have more than one part, which is not fair, right? It's like, oh, it's only 3 questions, but you know, part 1 has A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? So it's cheating. So the first question here is that there are kind of 2 arguments in this paper, okay? And this is a little hint I'm going to give you. So Jared Diamond is going to talk about a progressivist argument, right? And then he's going to talk about his own. So again, I'll give you a little hint here. But he's going to start out in saying, you know, people used to think this about the switch to agriculture, but I think that's wrong, right? I think this is why we did it, okay? So just to kind of prepare you for what you're going to read, there's 2 arguments. He's going to talk about what people used to think, these progressivists, and then he's going to say, but I think that's hooey. This is what I think is correct. And he'll make his argument, okay? So I'd like to kind of hear both of those arguments. What did the people used to think and why? And then what Jared Diamond thinks and why, okay? So there's kind of 2 arguments to pull out of this. Might be a little tricky, but I believe in you. The second one, so what kind of data does Diamond use to support his idea that farming had a negative effect on the health of farmers? Whoops. I think I may have given away one of the premises there, but that's okay. Remember back in the coffee argument, right? One of my premises was that coffee is inexpensive. And the question was, how can I prove that to you? And I said, oh, well, I can get some data, right? I can do some research. So here, in question number 2, one of Jared Diamond's premises is that farming had a negative effect on the health of farmers. Oh, really? How can he prove it to us? And so he'll talk about a bunch of things, right? He'll try to prove to us that the switch to farming was bad for our health overall. And then finally, Jared Diamond will give us an explanation, right? So he'll talk about the main reason why people switch to agriculture in the first place. Okay? So yeah. Those are my questions. Those are my almost 3 questions. Does that sound okay? Does that make some sense? A little bit of sense? It's like a baby skunk. It makes a little sense. Get it? Terrible joke. Terrible. Hey, what do you get when you cross an elephant with a rhinoceros? Elephino. Get it? Terrible. Terrible joke. I'm trying to think. My partner was reading off all these bad jokes to me the other night, and there was one that just she couldn't even breathe. She was laughing so hard, and it was not that good of a joke. But she was just like, oh God, I wish I remembered what it was. I'll try and remember it. Okay, so the article itself is in Microsoft Teams. Okay, so if you look under Files, I think I have a folder called Readings or something. So you'll be able to read the article there, and then I'll just give me 30 seconds, and I'll create this assignment in Teams so that you can type inside it, right? And when you're done, you can submit it, and I'll have it. Everybody good? Good? Okay. So I'll let you get started with the reading. The assignment sort of page will appear in just a moment. And if you have questions, of course, I'm here to answer all your questions for you. All right, go to it. There we go. Sounds like that is it. That is it. Okay. the reading level so far? Is it easy enough to read? Yeah. He kind of does write for, like, he writes for regular people. He doesn't write for scientists, so he tends to be a little easier to read sometimes. That's part of it. That's part of that argument, yes. we doing, good people? Okay. Would you say this is so far, this task is easy, medium, or difficult? Or is it so difficult that nobody's talking to me anymore because you all now hate me? That's what it is? Ooh. Okay. Oof. You'll talk to me again, won't you, Felicia? Ilya? You'll talk to me again, right? Anybody? No? What's that?
I was watching you on that song.
You were watching it? Okay, so you're on, you're caught up? You're where we are? Sorry, what did you say? It doesn't want to work? It doesn't want to you. Maybe try restarting Teams. Oh, you have no internet.
Okay.
Maybe try another computer? Maybe your Ethernet's just unplugged or something. Yeah, that's a good, that's exactly what he's saying. Also note that this premise, right, it almost acts as like a little element, right, because he's trying to tell you that this is the case, right, that it is bad for health, and he's almost saying, well, why should we believe that, Jared? Here's why you should believe it. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. Chen, you okay?
My friend pretty much happy.
Oh, you gotta plug in? Kenny, you okay? Yep. The only thing I would say is if your conclusions are very close, it's not so much that they did adopt agriculture, because we know that they did.
Yeah.
There's no argument there. But was that switch to agriculture a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, that's the only thing missing. But otherwise, you're on the right track. How you doing? It's okay? Sifting through it. Of course. Yeah, that's good. That's all we can do, right? So keep working through it. So keep working through it. Again, there's two arguments here. Sometimes a clue to the argument is in the title, right? Like sometimes the conclusion is in the title, sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. Keep working through it. You'll be okay. I'll come back. Owen, how are you feeling about this? Yeah. Sure. If you're confused about a word, especially if it's like a sciencey word, ask me. I will help you with it. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. Or if he makes like a reference you don't understand, I can help you with that too. Yeah. But I get that. I know that most of the people in this school, English is not their first language, right? So that's always going to be an extra challenge, right? But we'll figure it out. cooperate either? Is your like body energy somehow like disrupting the internet somehow? Just electromagnetically or something? Oh, okay. Sorry. So Aria here, I know you've got a couple questions. I'm not sure if you've figured them out or not. But yeah, answer in teams. If you look under assignments, you'll see there's an assignment for this. In teams, in the comparative cultures channel, you'll see that there's an assignment there, so you'll be able to answer in there. The PDF is in files, and I think there's a little button to download it if you want to download it. Yeah. So yeah, so that's all there, and I think I put a due date of September 20th, so that should align with what you've said as well. Okay, so Aria, you're all set. You know what you're doing. Yes, okay, sounds good, Arya. Perfect. Uh, no, hang on. Okay, that sounds good. Awesome. Oh yeah, it's would you like to take a little break now? We've been working hard for a while. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll attack this again. Okay. All right. Break time. so we're kind of officially back here, people. I just wanted to take a minute and check in. Do you have any questions that are outstanding for you that you would like me to answer, or can I give you a little bit of assistance here in figuring things out? Okay, maybe let's start here, okay? So the first question has there's two arguments, right, that we need to figure out, right? So let's start with this progressivist argument on the switch to agriculture, okay? So what's the conclusion to that argument? Yeah? Is more efficient? What? What? Just that? Okay. Right. Okay. So the progressivists are saying that the switch to agriculture, the switch to farming, that was a good thing. Good move, humans. Right? Okay. So what's Jared Diamond's conclusion in the contrary, or on the contrary? It's less efficient, or it's the worst mistake in the history of the human race, right? So we have two arguments here. Progressivists saying, yeah, of course humans switch to agriculture. Agriculture is great. Look at all these benefits, right? Blah, 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 right? Jared Diamond is saying, actually, the switch to agriculture was bad move for humans, right? And of course, well, why should we believe that, Jared? Well, he'll offer some premises, right? He'll offer some supporting ideas, okay? So I think those are our two conclusions. Kind of, was this switch to agriculture bad, or was it ultimately good? And the progressivists think good move. Jared Diamond thinks epic fail, right? Mike asks here, does he need to write in his own words or just take information from the source? I would like you to write in your own words to the degree that you can, right? So you can use some of Jared Diamond's words because he's using certain terms. You can use some of it, but I'd like to kind of hear it in your own voice as much as you can, okay? Is that helpful to know the conclusions? To kind of know your starting point? And again, always ask yourself the question, right? Jared Diamond says switching to agriculture was the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Oh, really, Jared? Why should we believe that? And then let him answer that question for you, okay? Okay, we're going to do this. We can do this. We got this. Okay, good people. We've got just about 5 minutes left here. So I'd like this little assignment to be due on Monday. So you can work on it on the weekend, but you'll still have, you'll still have Monday that we can spend a little time on it, or you can ask questions if you would like. Okay, so if you've got some time on the weekend, it might not be a bad idea to try to finish this off. But if you still have some questions we can wait until Monday to answer those. So I'll leave that up to you. Yeah. Anything you would like to ask before we wrap it up here? So I'm happy to answer or help.
What's the due for real estate?
Monday night. Monday night, yeah. So lots of time. Everybody seems quiet. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay, then that's it for today. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Hope you have some fun Netflixing or whatever you had planned to do. I'm sure I'll have a lot of fun painting the house. That'll be just great. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Thank you for giving us the time, and I do hope you all the same.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, online people, we'll see you. If you have questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday morning, okay? So, goodbye. Have a nice weekend. Thank you, Arya, and thank you, Mike. And thank you, Arian, as well. Okay, see you Monday.